Chapter 2. Renaissance and Feudalism. Part A. Medieval Feudalism. Introduction. Feudalism was the political and economic system that existed in Europe between the 8th and 15th century. Feudalism was a contractual relationship between the nobles or landholders and the peasants based on the tenure of land. The common people worked as peasants or vassals for the nobles and fought wars for them in exchange for using their lands. Feudalism entailed that the poor people served the rich and the powerful in exchange for protection and security. Feudalism in Europe emerged in the early Middle Ages. Let us understand the emergence and rise of feudalism and the subsequent fall of feudalism in Europe. The Romans annexed Middle and North Europe. Over time, the Roman Empire expanded and prospered. Germanic tribes often attacked the Roman Empire. In 476 AD, the Germanic general Odovacar deposed the last Roman emperor Romulus Augustus and declared himself the emperor. This period is considered the beginning of the medieval age of European history. Holy Roman Empire. A Germanic tribe called the Franks came to occupy most of Central and Northern Europe by the 8th century. Charles the Great, also known as Charlemagne, became the king of the Franks in 771 AD. He expanded the Frank Empire and conquered present-day France, Germany, Belgium, Holland, Switzerland, Austria, Italy, and Spain. He adopted Christianity as the state religion. He helped quell a rebellion against Pope Leo III, who in turn declared Charlemagne as the emperor of the Romans. As the Pope extended his support, Charlemagne's empire came to be known as the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was huge, and so it posed administrative difficulties in running the empire. There were also frequent attacks from outsiders. Charlemagne also had to face many problems due to economic instability of the empire. In order to deal with the economic crisis, Charlemagne instituted a tradition of giving land to his nobles in return for military service. This led to the emergence of a new class of people called feudal lords. This is how the institution of feudalism evolved. The feudal lords had their own army. Rise of feudalism and its reasons. Political instability. After Romulus Augustus' defeat, the Roman Empire collapsed, which created political instability in Europe. Charlemagne prevented further disintegration by consolidating and expanding his empire. However, after his death, his successors were not able to hold on to the vast empire. This was followed by disorder and battle for power, leading to political anarchy in Europe. This led to the rise of feudalism in Europe. Weak central power. The ineffective rule of the successors of Charlemagne resulted in them losing power over their administration. The feudal lords were supposed to provide armies and pay taxes to the king in exchange for the king's land. The armies were loyal to their lords and not to the emperor. So, the weak rulers had to now depend on the feudal lord for security and protection. This resulted in a weak central power as the feudal lords became more powerful and controlled the rulers. Decline of centralized administration. The collapse of the Roman Empire weakened the central administration. This resulted in an economic crisis which required a decentralized administration, that is, where powers are distributed amongst various individuals rather in a single authority, such as the king. A hierarchical order existed for the distribution of agricultural land. At the top of the hierarchy was the king, whose land was divided among barons. The barons distributed the land to the lords, who in turn distributed it to peasants and farmers. The nobles assumed all power and took over important rights in administration. Thus, they slowly became more and more powerful. This led to further entrenchment of the feudal system. Supporting local need. The common people, especially the farmers, faced constant threats to their life and property due to the frequent attacks of hostile tribes. So, they pledged their loyalty and handed over their lands to the lords in exchange for protection and security. In other words, the farmers became slaves of the landlords. With a weakened central rule, the judicial system also collapsed. Consequently, there was no way to resolve land disputes. The nobles began to settle land disputes on their own. As a result, they became more powerful. The farmers were supposed to pay a part of their agricultural income to the nobles in return for protection. They also had to sell their produce to the lords. Thus, the farmers depended on the nobles for financial support. This made the nobles even more powerful, as they had the masses dependent on them. Nature of feudalism. Land ownership provided power in the feudal system. The king owned the land in the kingdom and distributed it amongst the nobles for cultivation. The nobles higher in the hierarchy, such as the dukes and the earls, distributed the land amongst the subordinate nobles, such as barons. The barons rented their lands to vassals, who received protection in exchange for loyalty to the barons. Feudalism was based on service, loyalty, and protection. The king was at the top of the feudal pyramid and was the most powerful, as he exerted control over the rest of the nobles and vassals. Below the king were the nobles, such as the dukes and the earls, followed by lesser nobles such as the barons, and then the lesser lords, that is, knights. At the bottom of the pyramid stood the vassals, who included farmers and serfs or laborers. The vassals fought for the nobles and pledged their loyalty to the nobles and not the king. The nobles pledged their loyalty to the king and provided armies to the king. Feudal society. Thus, we can see that the feudal society consisted of three classes. The upper class included the king and the nobles. They were the most powerful, and they enjoyed the privilege of power and wealth. The middle class included the people living in towns and cities. The lower class included the farmers and serfs who cultivated the land. But they were treated as slaves and bonded laborers and led a hard and grim life. Growing importance of manors. The manor was the center of power in the feudal system. The estate of the feudal lord, which included his fortified castle and the surrounding area, was called a manor. It included the homes of farmers, churches, granaries, and fields adjacent to them. The manors were politically independent and became an integral part of the feudal system. The manor was a self-supporting financial unit. The nobles presided over the manor, just as the king presided over his kingdom. The nobles had courts in their castles, which were attended by subordinate lords and serfs. The farmers provided military services to the lords. Various fairs and festivals were celebrated and sports activities organized at the manor. Crusades or religious wars. The Turks captured the city of Jerusalem in 1076 from the Arabs. Jerusalem was considered a holy place by both the Christians and Muslims. Previously, the Arabs had allowed the Christians to visit the city. The Turks, however, attacked Christians visiting the city of Jerusalem. This angered the Christians in Europe. Peter the Hermit was a priest who raised his voice against the Turk injustice and mobilized the Christians in Europe to fight the Turks. Pope Urban II also exhorted the people to fight the Turks and win back Jerusalem. This call for war was heeded by thousands of people and led to the First Crusade in 1096. The Crusades were religious wars fought between the Christians and Muslims. The word crusade comes from the French word croix, which means the cross. Kings, nobles, and common people fought in the Crusades for their religion. 9 crusades were fought between the 11th and 13th century. Initially, the Christians fought the wars to reclaim Jerusalem from the Muslims, and later for economic and political gains. In the First Crusade, the Christians were able to capture Jerusalem. However, more crusades were fought to win back Spain and Africa from the Muslims. The Crusaders wanted to spread their religion and curb the influence of Islam in the West. In 1187, Saladin, the king of Egypt, won back the city of Jerusalem from the Christians. This led to the Third Crusade from 1187 to 1192. Effect of Crusades. The Christian Church adopted various measures to spread the religion of Christianity. Consequently, the Church gained importance. As people donated money to support the Crusades, the Church became richer and more prosperous. It also brought about patriotic feelings among the Christians. The influence of the nobles declined as they were participating in the Crusades and were away from their lands. Consequently, European kings became powerful, thus weakening the feudal system in Europe. As people traveled huge distances to fight, there was a jump in trade and transportation facilities. This resulted in the birth of new cities and towns as trade centers. The Crusades between the Christians and Muslims led to a better understanding between the two religions. It also brought together the Eastern and Western cultures. Concept of feudalism in India. Feudalism began to emerge in India after the fall of the Maurya and Gupta dynasty. However, feudalism in India differed from feudalism in Europe. Indian feudalism was mainly related to financial matters of land. The kings would grant lands to the people. There were two classes, namely noble lords and serfs. The granting of lands to farmers and peasants was hereditary. The lords would provide protection to the farmers and serfs or vassals in return for a huge part of their income. Consequently, the lords became rich while the farmers became poor. The lords paid protection money to the king in return for a license of power. Samudragupta captured several states in South India and gave them internal autonomy. The policies of Samudragupta sowed the seeds of feudalism in India. The medieval age saw a strong feudal system flourish in India, even during the Muslim rule in India. In the Vijayanagar Empire, the feudal lords were called Nayaks. Feudalism was prevalent even in the Bahmani kingdom, a Muslim state in the Deccan region. Even though the rulers changed, the feudal system continued as the lords and nobility remained the same. During the Maratha rule, Chhatrapati Shivaji seized the grants of lands from lords such as the Deshmukhs and Deshpandes, etc., and instead began to pay these lords. However, after the Mughal king Aurangzeb attacked the Maratha state, Chhatrapati Rajaram reinstated the practice of granting lands as vatans or jagir. He started giving land grants to triumphant knights after battles. Later, the British also adopted the practice of granting land, which led to various small states. These independent states later became a part of independent India. An example of feudalism in India can be seen in the Hyderabad province. The zamindari system or granting of land was prevalent in Telangana. A few landlords owned large tracts of land running into thousands of acres. The farmers were treated like bonded laborers or serfs and lived a harsh life. The system of Jagir, where the king granted land, existed in parts of Marathwada and Karnataka. The Jagirdars, or the owners of land, ill-treated the farmers and serfs. Decline of feudalism in Europe. The latter half of the Middle Ages saw a decline of the feudal system in Europe. The reasons for the decline were the various disadvantages of the feudal system. The feudal system was based on inequality and exploitation and led to the concentration of power in the hands of a few people, that is, the nobility. At the time, the European economy was experiencing a phase of transformation as the traditional barter system was discarded and replaced with the use of coins as currency gaining prominence. People began to use currency for financial transactions. Development in transportation facilities improved trade and commerce and spurred the growth of new commercial centers such as Venice, Genoa, and Florence. With trade improving, a new class of wealthy merchants emerged in Europe who supported the kings in order to garner favors. Consequently, the king and the monarchy, both of which were previously dependent on the nobles, slowly became powerful. The kings led the nobles to take part in the Crusades. As a result, the political influence of the nobles began to diminish and feudalism came to an end. The French Revolution of 1789 further led to the decline of feudalism. Thus, the changes in the social structure and economy of Europe spurred the fall of feudalism.
If you like our videos, please do share and subscribe to our channel.